The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family business with experienced craftsmen offering wood, vinyl, and composite windows. WindowWorldofWesternMA.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we take a train to Paintown, which in our case will be East Hampton, next week, and which the human monster truck, Perry Von Vicious, can give us a little more insight into.
Which is coming in a little hot. So if you want to bliss out and get cosmic, we'll also hear about the collaboration between Northampton Jazz Festival and Signature Sounds to bring Sun Ra Orchestra to the Academy of Music this Sunday.
But first, sometimes in trying times, it's best to keep a level head about the things happening in and around you.
In which case, Mr. Universe has a few techniques to remind us of.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
We usually do kitchen table astronomy from the Amherst kitchen table of Hampshire College astronomer Salman Hamid's house. But because you, Dr. Salman Hamid, Mr. Universe, are also behind Kainat Studios, which is bringing science to South Asia, including specifically Pakistan and India, your home country and its neighbor have been in the news an awful lot lately, but we are going to apply the scientific method that we talk about here so frequently to this global political issue that hits close to home for you here in Amherst.
Right. So just some context. Last week was a bit tough. This was one of those cases where the two countries, and if people don't know that, just as a reminder, both have over 150 nuclear weapons each. And this time they came very close to an all-out war.
And I'll stop you right there to say that the Northampton-based physician, Dr. Ira Helfand, who's been part of two organizations that have won the Nobel Peace Prize, has said many times, including on our show, that a small-scale nuclear war, even just between India and Pakistan, could cause catastrophic global devastation.
Right, and it's an understatement. It's not going to be good for anyone. I mean, I think that is true, but certainly complete destruction of people over there. And so why this particular incident almost went out to all-out war, there was a terrorist attack in Indian-held Kashmir. So Kashmir is disputed territory between India and Pakistan. Half of it is with India administered and half of it is in Pakistan. But it has lasted since 1947 when the two countries were partitioned. And so basically Kashmir has been in dispute since 1948 when it got partitioned. Now, after a terrorist attack, this happened a couple of weeks ago. India blamed groups that behind that were based in Pakistan. Pakistan denied it. And India said, well, we are going to attack these terrorist camps and so on and so forth. So these type of things have happened in the past. These type of blame games also happened. But this time, what was different was that India attacked. But usually, if in the last few years, when something like this has happened, it has happened only within the territory of Kashmir, which is disputed. But for the first time, when India attacked, they also attacked in mainland Pakistan. And that was a departure from earlier times. And then it wasn't clear what's going to happen. When this attack happened, and there's a lot of media frenzy associated with that as well in particular. And I'm not saying that because I'm from Pakistan, but people also have mentioned that. The government of Modi is a right-wing government.
The government of India, yeah.
The government of India. And the media also was egging it on, looking for revenge, looking for war. On the Pakistan side, actually, people actually have not been looking for war. That has not always been the case, but certainly in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years, Pakistan economically has not been doing well. And their reaction when the tensions were high. So terrorist attacks happened a couple of weeks ago, and there was an expectation that India is going to take some action. In Pakistan, actually, there were a lot of memes going on. In fact, there was an article in the New York Times as well about memification of war, that was partly what's taking place. And those were really funny because they were self-deprecating. There were a lot of humor in it, again, from the Pakistan side. For example, Pakistan has a lot of loans from the World Bank and IMF and things like that. And they said, well, if you do take on us, you will have to take our loans as well. And so on and so forth. So there were a lot of memes about cricket and things like that. But when the attacks happened, when India attacked mainland as well, then it intensified, and Pakistan did claim to down a couple of Indian fighter planes as well. So that was a big deal. There's a lot of dispute about how many? Pakistan claimed actually 5 or 6. India did not acknowledge any. But it looks like that there are like these French high-tech planes, like 1 or 2 were down. At least one, there's a wreckage also. And Pakistan has Chinese planes, and these were French top-of-the-line planes. And so there
Because all the U.S. planes just fell off aircraft carriers into the ocean.
That is true here. But so that was an interesting aspect, and which was a little bit unexpected. So people are also interested, other militaries are also interested of how did that happen? Why did that happen? And there's a real battle going on, war going on, impacting real people. But for militaries and for other countries, this is also a live demonstration of technologies. So people are also looking at, well, wow, Chinese technology is really sophisticated. There is a whole element of discussion in there. I don't want to focus on that. But what I want to focus on that while this was going on, then last Friday, things have escalated quite a bit. There is a lot of fog of war, there's a lot of misinformation, but it looked like Pakistan had also made some attacks on Indian territory because Pakistan had said, well, we have to respond as well. But then while some negotiations were going on, 3 of the air bases in Pakistan, so these are the military air bases, were hit by missiles. Now, that was a big deal because these air bases were, first of all, those are major ones, but also one of them is near the military headquarters in Pakistan and near the capital in Islamabad. So this air base was in Rawalpindi. My family actually lives in Rawalpindi. So you say, oh, there is a missile attack there. So that changes the equation quite a bit. It was unclear how Pakistan is going to respond, and Pakistan apparently did respond with a flurry of missiles going the other way. Just to give you a context of what is happening in this connected world, one of the producers of Kainat, Roshan Bukhari, who lives in Lahore, you never know what's going on in the fog of war, but then he sends me a text and he says, by the way, it looks like there's going to be a full-out war because this is what I can see from my rooftop. And he sent me a short video that had smoke coming out, and there was an explosion that had happened beforehand. And that was real. I was like, okay, so he's in Lahore. That meant it was near Lahore. There was another one. There was a confirmation that was in Rawalpindi. And so it looked like that this may actually escalate out of control. Now, as I've mentioned about the nuclear weapons itself, because if there is an all-out war, Pakistan is much smaller than India. It has a huge disadvantage in conventional weapons. And Pakistan has said, well, we are going to defend ourselves. And if we have to defend it with nuclear bombs, we are going to defend it at the expense of basically both sides destroying themselves. I mean, that's another type of deterrent. So that's where things were scary. Then it looks like the U.S. intervention came in as well. Marco Rubio joined in the conversations, and then there is a ceasefire since Saturday. But for a few hours, it looked like it's going to be an all-out war.
We have been somewhat critical of the Trump administration in this second incarnation in response to budgets. We mentioned last week the NEA funding that has been cut at Amherst Cinema. We're going to have a big conversation on Wednesday with all sorts of different organizations that have had their funding cut. But you and Pakistan are crediting the Trump administration with helping to make this ceasefire possible.
Yeah, I mean, credit where credit is due. I mean, in the sense that there were other countries that tried to lower down the temperature. So Iranian foreign minister actually was shuttling between Pakistan and India. Saudis were also involved, but it wasn't going down. And India and US are pretty close allies. After the terrorist attack happened in the Indian-administered Kashmir, and then later on as well, U.S. could have taken a one-sided approach, the way U.S. has done that, for example, with Israel and Palestine. And that would have poured kerosene on the fire, because there was a lot of war hysteria in the Indian media, and it looked like India is going to attack. So if the president had come out and given a carte blanche to Prime Minister Modi, that could have been detrimental. But instead, President Trump came out and his tweet or truth or whatever it comes out, and he said, these guys should tamp down these things. And this conflict over Kashmir has been going on for thousands of years. Okay, now we can laugh about that. No, it's not thousands of years because no, Pakistan and India as countries, separate countries, did not exist for thousands of years. It's only since 1947, so on and so forth. But it sort of set the tone a little bit. And then when the conflict really started to escalate, J.D. Vance, this is also, I think, reflects where different people are within the administration. So J.D. Vance actually, right before the full escalation happened, J.D. Vance said, what is happening in Pakistan and India is none of our business. And that was the wrong message to a certain degree. But apparently, Marco Rubio got involved quite heavily because it looked like that this may escalate quite further. When the attack on the bases, Air Force bases, happened in Pakistan, and Pakistan retaliated, appears quite heavily. The Prime Minister of Pakistan also announced a meeting of, I think it's the National Command Authority or something like that, which actually deals with nuclear weapons. Now, that meeting, it didn't happen. But I think the fact that he announced that we are going to have that meeting in itself served as a deterrence. And so Marco Rubio got seriously involved. And it seems like that there was a full day or more of various negotiations of both sides to actually de-escalate that. And Pakistan then said, well, I mean, that Marco Rubio helped quite a bit, but ultimately it was the president that helped seal the deal. And in some sense, politically, I think that was a smart thing because President Trump wants to take credit for whatever is happening, and that credit was given.
He wants a Nobel Peace Prize, and I think go for it.
Yeah.
What could go wrong? If he's going to try to enact peace and the Nobel Association would honor him with that, they're going to be watching the kind of ways that he goes about trying to enact peace. Seems like a good goal to have.
Right. I mean, this is a weird thing to say, but but because President Obama won the Peace Prize, which again, I actually have objections to that.
Me too.
The way sort of like drones and things like that.
Well, they tried to give him the Nobel Peace Prize because he was saying he was going to disarm the nuclear arsenal of the world. And it was a way to be like preemptively say, this is good, do it. And then he never did it. And also the attacks with drones and became much more mainstream in terms of using that. So that's a whole other thing. But for whatever reason, if that could be in a positive sense, I don't have a problem with that. But talking about drones, one of the scarier part of this conflict is the massive use of drones. So India used Israeli drones in there that were in major cities attacking in Pakistan or coming to in Pakistan. And then they were testing basically air defenses, and Pakistan was using Turkish drones going the other way. So to me, that actually is the modern warfare that's going to be very tricky because your threshold of going to another country or engaging with something that actually gets quite a bit lower. But this is a long way to say what I really want to talk about is skepticism, because there was so much misinformation from both sides that it was like, how do you figure out what is the right information? How do you figure out what is the right information?
And it is very hard because you get something on social media and of course you are hyper alert to that. So for example, from a Pakistan side, if Pakistan has done this, well, you should be skeptical about it because you are more inclined to believe in that. So what I would do is look at Pakistani newspapers and the more trustworthy ones. There is a full spectrum over there as well. And then triangulate. Now we are living the internet age, so the positive thing is that you can also look at Indian newspapers, and you look over there, and there was a completely different world. And then what I would have to do is look at BBC, Guardian, New York Times. You'd usually be a little bit behind, but look at BBC, Guardian, and even read within it what they are saying. Is this something coming from just a spokesperson of Pakistani army or the Indian army, or is it something more? And of course, like I said, direct information was also coming from individuals. Hey, this is from outside. Somebody that you know. This skepticism, we talk a lot about it within the sciences as well. Claims for life elsewhere, aliens, UFOs, or whatever. You have to be skeptical. That's the same kind of skepticism that actually is helpful in this context as well. I don't want to single out Indian media in that sense. Pakistan media is not that better. But in this particular case, Indian media on one of the days actually really went on and announced that Karachi had fallen, Lahore had fallen. That
big Pakistani cities, if you're not familiar with
Pakistani
that.
Pakistani cities, and Islamabad that surrendered, or a military head was under arrest. I mean, these were things that would be easily verifiable very soon. Pakistan also made some claims, although they were not as outlandish, but they had claims, for example, that they have shot down some planes and the pilot has been captured. Again, that pilot never materialized. There's already a fog of war, but then there is this deliberate misinformation that is now very common and can be spread very easily. How do you deal with that? And I think this thinking of how scientists deal with skepticism in terms of the news sources, that you look at it and you go like, is it really too good to be true? What is the source that is coming from? Be skeptical. You can actually try to triangulate what the actual information is, but it takes a lot of effort. But it's worth it because misinformation, especially in times like this, can actually cause real damage. Scientific skepticism, which is about aliens, UFOs, anything, claims of life, that's the same tools in some sense you can use for figuring it out what is really happening. Sometimes you will say, we don't know. And there are a lot of claims that are made in there which we go like, yeah, we don't know because Pakistan made claims, they're not verifiable. India made claims, those are not verifiable. So we can actually move along from that.
Triangulate your sources.
Exactly. And one other thing I would say, because we want to have a better world, what is really needed is more conversation across the border, not siloing out, not creating bigger battles or bigger walls. And we have just talked about Pakistan and India. We have not even talked about that none of this has a voice from Kashmir. I mean, what do Kashmiris want? Nobody wants to talk about that. So we need voices from Kashmir. But across the border, let people have more conversations. And we are trying to do that with Kainat. Some of our videos, especially for kids, we have a host, one from Pakistan and one from India. Because we think in this age, when even if you have a physical border, you can still have conversations across from it. And I just hope there is peace and hope more connections between Pakistan and India, individual to individual, and from educational institutes to educational institutes and things like that. I think those are the things that can really change the dynamic. One of the things that why astronomy is best for these type of things is because both people, whether you are on this side of the border or that side of the border, you look at the same sky and you can identify the same constellations and same planets at the same time. Astronomy really can be one of the best things in the sense of talking about peace across the countries, across the border.
We are almost ready to rumble with Perry Von Vicious, Western Mass and Beyond wrestler extraordinaire, who'll give us more insight to the local circuit and others he's participated in.
So next, we hear about the legacy 7 decades strong that started in Saturn's rings and landed on the Earth to bring us Sun Ra Orchestra, and a collaboration of local organizations bringing this alien jazz to Northampton.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy. Admissions now open for graduate programs in 2025. Learn how to become a changemaker at umass.edu/SPP. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, offering co-op advantage checking with cash back on all purchases, plus secure debit card controls, all from the UMass 5 mobile banking app. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop.
Signature Sounds and the Northampton Jazz Festival are teaming up for the first time to present Sun Ra Orchestra at Northampton's Academy of Music Theater on Sunday, May 18th at 8 p.m.
New this year, the Northampton Jazz Festival is entering into co-promotional partnerships with area music presenters and venues to showcase one-night-only jazz artists that are touring in the region. Collaborating with other promoters and venues enables more jazz musicians to perform in the greater Northampton area year-round.
With us to talk about this upcoming performance and their collaboration are Ruth Griggs of the Northampton Jazz Festival and Jim Olson of Signature Sounds. Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Nice to be here.
Nice to have you both. Ruth, we've had you on about the Northampton Jazz Festival in the past, and Jim, we've had you on about any number of things that Signature Sounds has been involved with over the years, including the Green River Festival, the transition of the Green River Festival, the Arcadia Folk Festival, the Back Porch Festival, your radio show, The Back Porch, on our alma mater, WRSI.
But now you're together like a Reese's peanut butter cup.
Yeah. Two great tastes that taste great together. You got my jazz and your Signature Sounds. Ruth, remind listeners about the Northampton Jazz Festival first and why this is something that is going to expand into being something that we see more regularly as opposed to once a year.
Well, that's a perfect description of it. I don't know how I can do better than that, Monty, but yeah, the Northampton Jazz Festival is coming back in its 14th year in September. The last weekend of September, September 26 on Friday, the Jazz Strut, and September 27, Jazz Fest Day. And we're just announcing our lineup now, so everything is ready to roll. And the board just started talking last year about how nice it would be to do more partnership with venues, all these wonderful venues that have come back, all of these wonderful presenters, and to just be a little more opportunistic with saying like, wow, Sean Mason is coming to the Valley. He's on his way between like Albany and Boston. Why doesn't he stop in Northampton? And we could host him for a show in March. So we did that in March with the Drake. And Jim called me up and said, I want to bring Sun Ra Orchestra to Northampton in May. How would you like to co-pro it with us? And it's just like, sure. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean,
Teamwork makes the dream work.
exactly. And who says no to Sun Ra?
I know.
Exactly.
If you're not familiar with Sun Ra, Jim, as a music DJ, do you want to give us a little background into the history and import of Sun Ra and the Sun Ra Orchestra?
Sure. Well, the first thing you need to know about the Sun Ra Orchestra is it was founded in the mid-1950s, meaning it's a 70-year-old organization. Anyone who's ever tried to keep a band together, imagine keeping a big band together for 70 years. Incredible. So Sun Ra, real name Herman Blount, was a fellow from Alabama who decided he was not from Alabama, that he was from Saturn.
Love it.
And he played early in his career with a lot of jazz legends, people like Fletcher Henderson and Coleman Hawkins, pretty much straight swing and bebop stuff. But somewhere along the way, he had a different vision for his band, and he formed the orchestra. And they...
And not orchestra.
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 A-R-K.
Correct.
Yeah.
So he claimed he was from Saturn, and he never let up on this in his entire lifetime, that he was from Saturn, the band was from outer space, they were going to return there at the end of their lives.
Because space is the place.
Space is the place.
Space is the place. And they explored all forms of jazz, of course, starting with what they were rooted in, which is sort of big band swing of Count Basie and Duke Ellington, but then also exploring the avant-garde. They were one of the first avant-garde bands that would go out there, but they always kind of brought it back to swing. It was very, very cool, and it's even today that it sort of carries on that way. The band, like any big band, has had turnover over the years, but they've had long-term members of the band. 101-year-old Marshall Allen is the current leader of the band. He doesn't make every gig, as you can imagine.
God bless his
I'm
soul.
47 and I can't make every game.
He doesn't want to get on the bus. I don't know why.
I mean, I'd imagine that global touring is a little hard on a 100-year-old body.
Yeah.
But sometimes he does make it out. Figures was one of those
He
times.
makes it out to accept his National Endowment for the Arts Jazz Master Award that he got like last week.
I'm glad they still give out awards.
Yes. Yes.
And we're speaking with Ruth Griggs of the Northampton Jazz Festival and Jim Olson of Signature Sounds, who are bringing the Sun Ra Orchestra to the Academy of Music this Sunday, May 18th. Sun Ra himself has returned to Saturn, and you mentioned that they have a 100-year-old member that's leading the band now. Tell us about some more of the members of this band who will actually be there on Sunday.
It's a combination of veterans of the band that have been in the band for decades and great young musicians. They have brought in some young talent. One of the leaders is a guy named Michael Ray, who used to tour around here with Michael Ray and the Cosmic Crew. I don't know if you remember that, kind of the jam band circuit. The thing about Sun Ra Orchestra is their influence is so deep. They sort of explored the whole idea of Afrofuturism with costumes and concept albums, and really became hugely influential on groups like Parliament Funkadelic and Bootsy Collins, but also on like the brass band, New Orleans brass band culture. Mm-hmm. And even today, very influential in collaborating with folks like Yola Tango.
Which you almost got to see, Khalees.
Yeah, there was a line around that building.
At the Big Ears
Yeah,
Festival.
Big Ears.
Yeah.
But I did get to see them on their own. They played 2 sets. It was really awesome.
And they came to Wilco's Solid Sound Festival a few years ago. Yep. So, yeah, playing with all sorts of different types and genres of music while playing with all sorts of different types and genres of music within their own music.
But still staying true to sort of the original vision of the band. Mm-hmm. The reason that I wanted to do this is I was in New Orleans last year for New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. And I went to an event that featured the band. There's a club in New Orleans called the Dewdrop Inn, which is a classic Chitlin Circuit club, as they used to call it, that started in the 40s. And a Chitlin Circuit club was, in that era, a black-run club for black musicians and a black audience. And a place where people could go and really let their hair down. Often a place that also featured drag. It went out of business in the early 70s. It sat dormant for years and years, and somebody bought it and brought it back. Mm-hmm. And they wanted Sun Ra Orchestra to be one of the first bands, because back in the 50s, they used to come through there and play on a regular basis.
Yeah, interesting.
And went into the Dewdrop, which is a fairly modest-sized club, maybe about the size of the Drake and Amherst, so a couple hundred people. And they just blew the roof off the place. It was one of the most joyous, most fun evenings that I've had in a long time. So I hunted down the manager and said, if the band ever wants to come to Northampton, we'd love to host a show. So here we are.
Here we are.
Great vision. So happy that they're coming. And, from a jazz perspective, they're foundational in the freedom that jazz musicians play jazz today. They were at the forefront of the free jazz movement. And when you listen to Marshall Allen, the leader, talk about how important it is to play what you don't know. Don't play what you know. He was classically trained as a saxophonist, went through the military, played in the military environment. But once Sun Ra got a hold of him, he was like, no, I don't want you to play like that. I want you to play what you don't know. And so that spirit of improvisation and playing from your soul, from your heart, from places that you don't know exist is an incredibly important component of jazz. And so the heritage that the Sun Ra Orchestra has brought to the jazz that we play today is awfully important to us, and one of the reasons why the Northampton Jazz Festival is so happy to partner with Jim Olson and Signature Sounds on this concert.
In the scope of the Northampton Jazz Festival and these in-between concerts, how is it splitting your attention between these two aspects of the Northampton Jazz Festival? Because now, you have the opportunity to bring jazz greats into the area all year round, but how does that affect what you do for the festival? Or does it affect what you do for the festival?
We do have to balance that carefully. You're absolutely right, Khalees, because we have a festival to run in September, and we feel really great about having this kind of opportunistic concert happen in May or in March or in January or in November or in December, because that's sort of a quieter time for us. But once, June starts, we're pedal to the metal for the Jazz Festival. So the board understands that, and we have our arms open to whatever opportunity happens to kind of fly into them. And, a call from Jim Olson is a perfect example of that, where we just say yes. And we share, hopefully, the profits. But then again, we also might share the loss. I don't think that's going to be the case here. But that's how we have each other's backs with any of these agreements. And it's interesting because every presenter or venue has a slightly different way that they operate. And so we need to be flexible to work within their operation and make it work financially for both entities. And it's just been kind of a fun new entrepreneurial thing to explore.
Have you both seen Sun Ra Orchestra live before?
I
Jim
have
Olson, you
several
clearly
times.
have.
Several times. I saw him back in the day with Sun Ra.
Yeah.
Used to come to the Iron Horse frequently. One of my favorite Iron Horse shows of all time, was the Sun Ra Orchestra doing an all Disney program.
Oh my word! That sounds.
I didn't know that Disney was on Saturday.
In costume, with a costume change at the set break in the middle.
In Disney costumes, or in more of the traditional?
No,
Sun Ra,
sort of more of their traditional,
Okay.
and they'll be in costume on the 18th too at the Academy. For sure.
They're always
They're
in
always in
costume.
costume.
Yeah.
It'd be creepy to
That's-
see them dressed as Mickey Mouse, though.
But I just wish I had a recording of that Disney stuff because it was a
When
blast.
I wish
Oh yeah, there's so many good Disney songs.
Blown out and so funky. I can only imagine. Oh, that sounds so awesome. I'm so jealous right now.
Jim, you have run venues. You run the Parlor Room. You've created the Green River Festival, handed that off to DSP shows. Now you're working with the Northampton Jazz Festival and the Academy of Music. And you go to a lot of shows across the country. How rare is it, or does this happen a lot, that an organization like Signature Sounds, a record label that puts on these festivals, teams up with another nonprofit jazz festival? You've seemed very collaborative over the years. I've collaborated with you, full disclosure, on many things at the Shea Theater. Is this unique to the Valley musical culture, or is this something that's having to happen more, these partnerships with organizations working together to bring music into these spots? Even the Academy of Music is a nonprofit in and of itself.
It's fairly unique. It's not incredibly unique, but so much of the concert scene when you get to larger cities is so dominated by big companies like Live Nation and whatever. They're not terribly collaborative. They're very much siloed organizations.
Exclusionary, I might even.
Yes. In that case, the fact that we are in this intimate market with so many great venues and such an incredible music scene, it only makes sense to collaborate. Why not?
Well, and also when you collaborate, you, from a marketing perspective, which is kind of what I am by trade, you suddenly expand your target audience so that, Jim's got thousands of people that he's reaching, but we have our jazz fans that we're reaching. So if you're trying to fill a room or fill a house, it just makes it that much easier if you're going in it together. I mean, when we had Sean Mason at the Drake, Lincoln Allen said, without you guys behind this, we would have maybe had a third of the people here that we have tonight. So all boats rise. So why not do it? I also believe that this kind of collaboration is what we need to do to succeed in this smaller market that we're in order to attract the musicians to come here and to have a positive experience. We need to collaborate to have that kind of firepower that we need to attract them.
Jim Olson, you have a Sun Ra album in front of you. Can you talk about it a little bit?
Yes, they put together an album last year called Lights on the Satellite. It's a fantastic album. It got me very excited for the show when I heard it. It's what they do, and they do it well. Even kind of expanding this time around to include some vocal pieces and stuff, which isn't always the case. Very exciting, very worth checking out. Maybe we could hear
You could read along with me in your book. I play with space and time like Sun Ra. Ruth Griggs, you just won a jazz award recently, right?
Aw.
Can we talk about that for a minute before we let you go?
If you wish. Yeah, the Jazz Journalists Association named me a jazz hero for 2025. It's a nationwide award that this year was given to about 25 different folks, typically in smaller markets, doing more grassroots support and education in jazz. And my dear friend Eugene Newman, who's the director of the Vermont Jazz Center with his wife Elsa Barrero, was kind enough to suggest that I be named a jazz hero. He and his wife were named a jazz hero last year. As I've said to many people, if Eugene Newman thinks I'm a jazz hero, that's all I need. I'm good. Thanks very much. So I really appreciate the love, and we'll keep it circulating around.
Jim Olson, Signature Sounds is definitely more Americana, bluegrass, roots-oriented. And although I think Sun Ra is kind of genreless, is definitely rooted in jazz. What about his sound might appeal to your base if they are like, jazz isn't for me, too many notes? But I think that his sound is really kind of universal in a way. And what would you say to folks who are fans of Signature Sounds but maybe not into Sun Ra to get them interested?
Well, at its base, this music swings, and it's danceable, and it's fun. You know, as I mentioned earlier, if you like New Orleans brass bands, you'll love this show.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, for me, the opportunity to present, you know, a real innovator, someone with this sort of long history. This organization has been incredible over 70 years, and I just feel like it's important. Maybe not every Signature Sounds fan would be into this, but I think if they come to the show, they'll love it.
And we will have the Northampton Jazz Festival fans that fill those seats, because any true jazz fan appreciates the value, again, that Sun Ra Orchestra brings to the jazz world. It's foundational. It's the roots. They are part of the roots of this great American tradition that we call jazz, and it's important to honor them. And I've had so much fun talking about Sun Ra Orchestra that we're bringing to a variety of people, and they're like, oh my God, I remember 45 years ago, the Sun Ra concert that I went to. I'll never forget as long as I live it. Blah, 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 blah. So, you know, they'll be there.
I feel like every Sun Ra concert is transformational in some way. They're never quite the same, and that's a tribute to them and their sound too, that it's been evolving with the times and with the players for 7 decades. Who else can say that?
Right. Ruth Griggs, NEPM has been doing our part to try to keep jazz in the common parlance on the radio airwaves here every evening. Who's your favorite jazz host? Is it Tom Reaney, Bex Taylor, Kari
No way.
Jerry, or Peter Sokolowski?
That's
way.
so mean. I know.
I did it
Like, I'm
to
usually
be mean. I did it to be
usually the
mean.
one
You
who's
don't-
like,
and
I'll
You
pick
know
your
I
favorite
love them all,
child.
but I don't know if you mentioned Avery Sharp.
And Avery Sharp.
Because he's my new favorite. I love what he curates on Friday nights. And I've told it to his face many times. I've told Tom Rini. I just think that as a musician and as a bass player, and his experience with music is so rich and deep that what he puts together on that show is, to me, incredibly satisfying.
Friday nights, NEPM 88.5.
And let's not forget about Kari Najiri and the Jazz Safari,
Jazz Safari.
On Saturday nights. I love.
Yeah, right.
You bet.
We're pretty lucky here.
Yeah.
We are beyond lucky, and thank you for all of their support of jazz in the Valley. It's huge.
And you can come see a huge jazz show this Sunday, May 18th. Academy of Music, the Sun Ra Orchestra, a co-promote from Ruth Griggs and the Northampton Jazz Festival and Jim Olson, Signature Sounds. Thank you both so much for coming in, talking about Sun Ra with us.
You bet.
Thank you. See you there.
Sure. Get your tickets at aomtheater.com.
Theater spelled the pretentious way.
The right way.
Our dictionary editor would take umbrage with that.
All right, I think we're warm enough to get in the ring.
Stretching out and getting ready to rumble, so we'll bring in our first contestant in this corner, the human monster truck, Perry Von Vicious.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
That is the walk-up music of our guest. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. And although the McMahons of WWE fame are based out of Connecticut and then sometimes go on to run entire government agencies,
Let's not.
every wrestler has to start small before getting to enter the rings of this greater country.
And frankly, you and we would be surprised at how many wrestling circuits there are in Western Mass and New England writ large, McMahon's notwithstanding.
With us to talk about the rumbling that we are now ready for is the current holder of the Grind Grand Championship belt, which you have brought with you into the studio, the
so
human
psyched.
monster truck himself, Perry Von Vicious.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We've been aching to get you on the show ever since Monty told me that you showed up at Judge John Hodgman's show for him to adjudicate between you and your sister.
I call her my sister.
Yeah.
She's a close friend who I helped to train in pro wrestling. She's wrestler Delmy Exo, who is multi-time MLW women's champion. So she's on TV pretty frequently now. Cool. And also is one half of the pair that run Pro Wrestling Grind just in East Hampton, Massachusetts.
So, East Hampton, Massachusetts, and Pro Wrestling Grind. Tell us about when this pro wrestling started in East Hampton, right in our backyard, and like who is involved and where do you wrestle? Because I really wanted to do a segment where we get into the ring with you, but I guess that's incredibly difficult to find people that want to carry the liability to body slam a radio host.
Well, and it takes time to set those rings up. I remember when there used to be wrestling at the World War II Club in Northampton, like the amount of time that they would need to set up and get everything ready before even the wrestlers show up, let alone the people coming to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not a different situation at Pro Wrestling Grind. The two owners there are Delmy Exo and her fiance Iron Rip Bison, who has been my one of my fiercest opponents and tag team partner on and off again over the last 8 years. And the three of us are essentially the setup crew for Pro Wrestling Grind. Every show day, we arrive at the Pulaski Club, the world-famous Pulaski Club in East Hampton, Massachusetts, and we start lugging steel girders and giant pieces of wood and everything else the ring is built out of up a very rickety fire escape stairwell to the second floor.
Perry, they're called warm-ups.
This is all part of the training.
Yeah. It's true. By the time the show's going, I'm very warm. But it's quite a setup to put together. We also, we put everything together: the ring, the guardrails, all the seating, the entryway, which is very well made at Pro Wrestling Grind. A lot of indie wrestling companies sort of just have a black curtain that people enter through. They have giant steel girders covered with lights with two giant doors that open.
Wow.
And
like a fog machine behind it and all that.
Yeah,
love that.
It's very cool. It's something we're very proud of there because it was all hand built by Rip Bison.
Whoa!
Yeah.
And that's also awesome because, like, the thing about wrestling in this form is that it is about the performance. It's about the showmanship of it. So having, like, all of that to start off and get you ready is pretty spectacular.
It's a lot like being in bands at the indie level, because we're also designing all of our own merchandise. We're the ones running our merchandise table. I'm one of the few indie wrestlers with an action figure, and it's
Yes.
because I taught myself to 3D model and own some 3D printers.
Yes.
There's
some video of you doing it and
Yes.
painting them afterwards, which is pretty. That's a lot. That's a big extra mile to go.
Let's rewind your career, though, champ, because you are the reigning grind champ right now. And you grew up here in Western Massachusetts, right?
I did, yeah. I was born in Greenfield, currently live in Deerfield, so, bustling metropolises if there ever were some.
And talk about when you entered the world of professional wrestling and became the Perry Von Vicious human monster truck that we know and hear today.
So I started from a place that most people wouldn't think of, especially if you're meeting me today. When you meet me today, I'm a guy who lifts weights a lot. I'm 245 pounds at 6'3". I look arguably like an athlete.
You look like an athlete.
Yeah, I appreciate it. That's very kind of you. But that wasn't always the case. I was a chubby kid. When I very first started training, I was 300 pounds and not a good 300 pounds. I didn't wear it well. And I was coming from a background of playing in punk bands and being in theater. And I hit a point where through growth spurts in high school, suddenly I was 6'3", and at the time closing in on 300 pounds. It was a weird position to be in because you couldn't put me in a starring role opposite a high school girl because it looked very strange.
Yeah.
The size difference was not appealing. So I suddenly was being told, like, yeah, we just can't give you this part. Here's like a lesser part. And it really kind of soured me on theater. And it didn't get much better in college because we all still look very young, but I was still very giant in college. So I was continuing to get that sort of response. And eventually a friend of mine said, you watch wrestling here and there with your friends. Like, you ever think about it? It's kind of theater for giant gorillas. And like any kid who grew up during what wrestling refers to as the Attitude Era, the Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, of course I loved it. I'd played all the video games. I had the action figures. I watched it on TV. And so, I graduated college, and 2 months later, I walked into the Pro Wrestling Combine in Chicopee that was run by Kevin Landry, who was a very small sort of like extra for WWE here and there, and started training to be a wrestler. And 6 months later, in January of 2008, I had my first match.
Wow.
2008.
Yeah.
So you've been doing this for quite some time.
Just a little over 17 years.
Wow.
How different was it training in Chicopee versus when you went to Fukuoka?
Oh, it was a world of difference for a lot of reasons. The training that I was given here was essentially, we kind of get who we can get. Whatever shape they're in is the shape they're in. We're going to teach them to do everything in the ring safely. We're going to teach them how performances are structured so that they can be a competent performer going out to different promotions. And then we're going to give them a place where they can practice that over and over and over and learn everything that goes with it. How to fall, how to take care of your opponent, how to take care of yourself, all those sorts of things. When I went to Japan, I was already 16 years in. So I wasn't being given sort of the ground level up. But our trainer was Tajiri, who is a legend from WWE and New Japan Wrestling and ECW and all these places, along with a few other legends in Japan. Mentai Kid, who just yesterday actually had his retirement match. He was a Toramon trainee from Mexico who trained under Ultimo Dragon and Jushin Thunder Liger. The caliber of talent who were training us there was incredible. Like, we were starstruck walking into just the school. And the training was grueling and brutal and not any type of training that at the time I was 39, not anything I was expecting to be doing. And it was really hard, like really hard. A perfect example of how hard it was and what it meant to me was day 2, jet lagged. It was our second day of training. Our first training was 12 hours after landing in Fukuoka. The second day, I was tired. It was 98 degrees. It was something like 97% humidity. It was brutal. And in the first 2 minutes of that class, I broke my toe, my big toe on my left foot badly, like very badly. I told no one. For the next 3 months in Japan, I taped my foot up. I walked 10 miles a day to the gym and to training, did everything that was asked of me and told no one.
Wow. And this is in your late 30s at this point.
My very late 30s.
Well, we're speaking with Perry Von Vicious, the human monster truck, who is the champion in Pro Wrestling Grind in East Hampton. Coming up, we'll take a little break and we'll hear about how you became the human monster truck and what that's meant for your career, how you became the champ, and where we can see you wrestle next.
Great.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Chavo was the oldest one. Old man Gory could pop.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. We are speaking with the champ of Pro Wrestling Grind in East Hampton, Perry Von Vicious, the human monster truck, who has been doing this now for a decade and a half plus, locally wrestling professionally. You became the human monster truck at some point, though, and that meant a sea change for your career.
It definitely did, yeah. The character that I started as was very textbook, basic 80s pro wrestling. I was a rich snob with a ascot and a monocle. Mm-hmm. It was all tearaway.
Not unlike Judge John Hodgman, where we first met. Yeah,
yeah. I think John Hodgman would have very much appreciated that character. And it was actually when the world was shut down. I was sort of already in transition away from that persona. I'd put on a lot of muscle, a lot of size. My style in the ring had changed. So begging off as the cowardly villain was no longer really fitting, and crowds had started to cheer me. And when the world was shut down, wrestlers had very little we could do to keep things going, apart from just killing time on Twitter. And there was one day where I was watching a bunch of kind of crazy 80s wrestling promos where they said the wildest, weirdest, nonsensical stuff. And I was like, I'm going to tweet like this. And the first thing that came to mind, in all caps, I just tweeted, I'm Perry Von Vicious, and I am a human monster truck. And for the next hour, my DMs went crazy from fellow wrestlers who were essentially saying, like, that's really good.
Yeah.
Stick with that.
Nice.
And I'd been a fan of monster trucks as a little kid. You know, I mean, what little kid doesn't enjoy them to some extent? And yeah, it became a really cool character shift for me, and people really like it.
So you're no longer a heel?
No.
You're a hero.
I am as fiery white meat a babyface as they come.
That tracks.
Yeah.
Tell us about how we can see you defend this belt that you've brought to the studio.
And who will you be defending it against?
Yeah, so about 2 weeks from now, it's Saturday, May 24th in East Hampton at the world-famous Pulaski Club. Pro Wrestling Grind presents a show called Combat Mosh, named for a song by a local band Lich King. And I will be defending in the main event. It's my first championship defense, having just won the belt, against Joseph A-Game Alexander, who is an incredible young talent. And it's kind of a rubber match. We had one singles match just before I left for Japan, where I won very decisively. And then a few months ago, we were both involved in a 6-person tag match, the finish of which saw him pin me. So we're 1 for 1 here.
Nice.
People will want to know how real this is. In the storyline, in the training, we realize it's very real. Broken toe, walking 10 miles to train.
Yeah.
The physicality, the sportsmanship, the athleticism, very, very real.
It's real to us in a way where we always feel we have something to prove to fans and to ourselves and to each other. We all go in there with a game plan of, I want to do this, I want to do that, I have these ideas. And collaboratively, we put the performance together, really looking to show out every time.
What is the move that you can do now in your 40s? You're 40-something now, right? That you wouldn't believe that if you told your 20-something self you could do this, that you can do?
My finishing move is called the Perry-go-round, where I pick my opponent up over my head, arms fully extended. I spin them around 2-3 times and basically throw them the way one might throw a pizza dough.
You gave both John Hodgman and me a Perry-go-round.
Yes, without the throw.
Yes.
I very kindly set you both back down on your feet.
Yes.
If this were not radio, I would have you give Khalees a Perry-go-round as
I'm
well, just so you
good.
could be part of the club.
If you're scared of heights, it's one I don't recommend.
Learning to fall is a skill that you
No,
can
I
take
fall
with you for the entire
particularly
life.
well
Yeah.
when I have to fall, but like hopefully not often. I'm gonna ask a left field question.
And you only have 30 seconds to answer it.
How many chickens do you actually have? I've only seen the one.
We have 5.
You have 5.
There's one that's very polite and behaves for pictures.
You have chickens that you personally own?
Yes.
Okay. Do you wrestle them? Is it like Rocky where you have to train and if you capture the chicken, then you
the
move it
other
faster?
4 clearly he wrestles.
It can feel that way.
Yeah, I know that they have been incorporated into boxing training, at least in the Rocky movies, which I think are so great. Perry Von Vicious, the human monster truck, who is the champ from Pro Wrestling Grind, who brought the belt with you here. You don't get to keep your own belt, which is kind of a bummer. You have to hand it over if you lose or if you retire. But yeah, I'm glad to have seen this belt. You can see pictures of it when you look at our podcast page. And one more time when we can see you defend this championship?
Saturday, May 24th, East Hampton, Massachusetts.
Saturday, May 24th. Pro Wrestling Grind champ, Perry Von Vicious, the human monster truck. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was a joy. On the next Fabulous 413, we head to Buckland to hang out with some of my favorite animals, sheep, because the Massachusetts Sheep and Wool Craft Festival is coming up.
So, at Walking Cloud Farm, we get to meet the very friendly and super snack hunting herd of Finn sheep and 3 of the organizers behind the upcoming festivities.
Literally, one of them ate my shoes. We'll also get an in-studio visit from Jay Wood ahead of his appearance at the Iron Horse, opening for Tune Yards, to hear some of the things that you can't hear because that show is sold out.
This is Sun Ra, Pink Elephants on Parade, which is available doing Disney stuff. We'll see you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.